To honor our colleague, our boss, our friend, Howard Smith, one of the finest newspaper men I have ever met. I think you can tell, yeah, give him a round of applause. Absolutely. I think you can tell by the crowd, the number of people here, that Howard was a very, very well-respected
What is he, dead?
newspaper person. Is very well respected man and newspaper. Thanks, Alan. We have a number of people who are going to speak tonight. It'll probably turn more into a roast than a toast, so we'll get started here. There are a few people, though, I need to thank very quickly. Number one, Cindy Smith, Howard's daughter. She was absolutely terrific in setting this up. Cindy, please stand. Really, Cindy did so much to help me get this thing going and set it all up, and she really is a wonderful person. She's in marketing with the Bisons right now. I also would like to thank Dan Zach, the news graphic artist. He put together the Howard card over here. I want to thank Vinny Chiaramonti. Vinny did the posters for us, did an absolutely outstanding job. Special thanks to Mike Harrington. Mike has a lot of great connections, so thank you, Mike. Last but not least, I want to thank Steve Jones and John Neville, who were instrumental in putting this together as well. So thanks to everyone. And now it's time to roast Howard Smith. First up among our many speakers is the editor of the Buffalo News, Margaret Sullivan.
Thank you, Dennis. I spoke with Howard this afternoon and I said, how are you doing? You doing okay with this? And he said he was doing pretty well until people started to say nice things to him. So, I'm going to have a few nice things to say here, but I would suggest that after that we get away from all that. And I know I'm sure there won't be any problem with that. And I just want to say I am getting a little ribbed here myself because I've gone through managing editors rather quickly in my relatively short time as editor, and there are those who say that I'm the Zsa Zsa Gabor or the Elizabeth Taylor of editors. I'm on number 4 and now he's walking out the door, but I'm sure it has nothing to do with me. Howard Smith has done basically 2 jobs at the News, sports editor and managing editor, and he has excelled at both. He came to the News in 1980 as the sports editor. He had been at the Washington Star and before that at the AP in New York, and he brought an awful lot of skill and an awful lot of talent, drive, and personality and knowledge to his jobs, and he's really done a wonderful job. He built a strong, vibrant, well-read sports section, and when it was time to take me up on the offer he couldn't refuse, he had the perfect person, Steve Jones, groomed to take over in sports. As managing editor, he has put, it's true, I have to say, that on days off, I've sometimes picked up the paper the next day and been somewhat surprised to see the number of sports stories that have crept onto page 1 in my absence. So we will be correcting that, but it was fun while it lasted. However, he has been hardworking, innovative, fair-minded, and always willing to hear people out. He's helped with our organization and communication and has helped steer us through some difficult times. He is a heck of a newspaper man, a great friend, and a truly good person. I know that many people will be telling Howard that they'll miss him, but I think that I can lay claim to being the person that will miss him the most, particularly since the job of managing editor will not be filled. But I'm happy that he's going to retire young and boyish, as he always has been, and in good health, and I know he'll enjoy it and make a contribution to his community in his new role, as he always has. I think that what I want to say most to Howard on behalf of the community and the staff, and very much on my own behalf, is a very heartfelt thank you. Thank you, Howard. Master of Ceremonies.
Thank you, Margaret. Next up,
Can we stop now?
No, you're going to enjoy this one. Get comfortable in your seats, everybody. Charlie Garfinkel. We told him to keep it short.
You know, I like to say it's always a pleasure following a dynamic, humorous, and well-spoken MC. Fortunately, I don't have that problem tonight. And Howard was thrilled because I did waive my appearance money for this one night only. Now, a couple of things. You may not believe this, but Howard's real name was Smithersky, and I'm going to prove it to you. When he's brought up in Westchester County, he was, all league in tennis and in track, but unfortunately, his marks weren't quite as good as they should have been. In the senior year, he did not graduate. So they're having the final graduation, and Howard sort of came in the back door, best liked guy in the school. And all the people who are graduating started yelling, please, please, give Howard a chance. Give him a chance. The principal says, Howard, you're such a great guy. We are going to give you a chance to graduate. He says, answer this question, and you can graduate. He says, 7 times 6. Howard says, 37. I'm sorry, can't graduate. One more chance. He said, okay. 8 times 5, 38. Can't graduate. Class is screaming. One more chance. Now, to show you the kind of class he was in. So finally they said, Howard, 5 times 5. He takes his calculator. After 10 minutes, he says, 25. The class yells, one more chance. And the other thing, Howard was, a little naive. The senior prom, he hadn't gone out much, and first day, goes out with the senior prom queen. They're at the drive in the front seat. She says, Howard, would you like to go in the back seat? Howard says, no, I'll stay here with you. It's okay. And then, as I said, before he became his brilliant self, he really wasn't too much with it. The new cars started, not that it was that long ago, but they came out with some new cars that had different turn signals. And his neighbor wasn't sure how it worked. So he asked Howard, he says, just watch the turn signals, see if they work. So he turns them on, and Howard's going, yes, no, yes, no. Now, when Howard first came to the news, I'll tell you, he first came and he told me he wanted me to write a little different. No more terms like his forehand was his bread and butter shot with a marginal error. I know, that's pretty good, okay. So he calls me in and I said, Howard, I've been here 5 years already and I'm still making $40 for my articles. And Howard says, and that's probably $20 more than you deserve. And then, he always loved when I called. Howard was always so tactful. If he didn't like the article, what would he say? Horrible, terrible, forget it, don't call it. And I know he never liked my calls. I'd call like 4 in the afternoon, they'd say be out to breakfast or be out walking the dog, things like that. But to be honest, Howard was always great to me. Now I have a real connection with the family. Cindy, his daughter, was my tennis assistant, did a phenomenal job, and she knew when to laugh at all the one-liners. And Matt was on the tennis team, and he still comes back and we constantly play. And Howard's terrific. If he beats you in the match, it makes you feel good. He says, beating you is better than drawing a bye. That's sort of low, you know what I'm saying? But I agree with Margaret Sullivan. I mean, the news, to me, the sports page is phenomenal. I think it's one of the best in the country all the time. The other thing people don't realize, what an ego Howard doesn't have. I mean, if you read any of the papers out of town, so many times a sports editor is in there for something or other. Howard, except for a couple of Jerry Sullivan columns, that was it, and that's just how he played. The other thing is, Howard is a heck of a tennis player. You'd think his game would be like his personality, sort of laid back a little. Serve and volley, quick in the court. He was terrific to me. We're going to be playing tennis again this summer, and Howard loves the one-liners, watch the groans. And I'll tell you, it was just a pleasure to work with him all these years, and I wish him the best. I'd be remiss to forget his wonderful wife, who she loves all the calls, right? The last time I talked to her, 20 minutes went by, I got off the phone, and my wife said, Charlie, she didn't say anything. It was all, I said, no, she said hello and goodbye, and that was it. Thank you.
Tough act to follow, huh? Next up is another would-be comedian, Robert J. Summers.
you. You're welcome, man. Is this on? Yeah, it is. Thank you. Well, that's a good start, huh? This is a great evening. I just remembered somebody, I forget who it was over here when I came in, they said of all the going away parties that have been going on the last few weeks, this is the one they've been looking forward to the most. I mean, because of the good food and the drink. I was looking around here, and this is scary, but I'm one of the few employees that was here before Howard got here. Back in, what would you say it was, Margaret, 81? 80. I had that little desk, I was a financial reporter then, and I had the little desk in the financial department where Dave Robinson sits now. And if you remember where Howard's desk was, it was right out there in the open, in the city room. And I remember when I first met Howard, he came in and shook hands and sat down, and I don't know, he did a couple of phone calls, and he must have noticed I was looking at him or something. And the next day, the maintenance department's in there building that wall around. Anyway, I still listened in on his phone conversations and watched him work, and while I was doing my financial stuff, and my one thought was, geez, I'm glad I don't work for this guy. And then as fate would have it, there I am working for him. But it turned out to be pretty good. One of the nice things Howard did for me, he assigned me to cover my favorite sport, which you all know is horse racing. And I got to go to some of the big races, the Triple Crown and the Breeders' Cup in New York City, I remember, my first year. And but this is a true story. I'm down there in New York at Aqueduct Racetrack and in the hotel and everything. It's great. I'm meeting these writers from Washington and New York and guys I'd seen their bylines in the paper, and they're being real nice to me, and I didn't know who I was from anybody. And then one guy came up to me and he says, you know who this is, Howard? But he says, are you the guy that works for Howard Smith? Oh, you poor thing. But I didn't know what to think, but I thought I'd give him a chance. So, but I wanted to say, I've been in the newspapers one way or another for 50 years now, and Howard is not the toughest editor I've had, but he's in the top 3. But he's also in the top 3 of the best editors I've had. I've learned a lot from Howard, and I wrote them down here so I would remember what I learned. He's a stickler for detail. He's a master of planning ahead. He can make a schedule 3 or 4 weeks ahead, Steve. It's a skill. It's a skill. He taught me how to use statistics and numbers to back up a story, but make sure those numbers are right. And he had another skill I noticed, because we used to have a day shift there at the sports department. Howard could come in at 7 in the morning, open up the paper that he didn't work on the night before because he went home early, but he'd spot an error like that, And then he had this clever way of pointing out errors to the rest of the staff, especially to me. I made a few. My favorite one, and everybody in sports knows this story, but I'm working the desk one night on the Sunday Outdoors page, and there's a picture of a hunter with in turkey season. He caught a wild turkey, and I didn't write the cut line, but somebody wrote the cut line that Joe Blow from Clarence is admiring the 250-pound turkey that he shot this week. And it went right by me and a couple other editors. I think he called us numbnuts copy editors. A couple days later, Howard didn't exactly take me aside and point out the error in my ways. He put this picture up on the bulletin board of the turkey, and he said underneath, "A turkey the size of Bruce Smith?" I think not. And then I'm sure people will be bringing this up later tonight. There's Howard's people skills. And his telephone skills. Howard taught us all how to deal with the readers out there. Steve remembers this story. It was early one morning. We were kind of under an early deadline, and I'm working what we called the morning slot, which means I was a glorified telephone operator. I answered the phone. The guy says, "When's the World Series?" I said, "I don't know." He wanted the dates. I guess he was planning his vacation. So I got up and walked over to the reference books there. We didn't have Google in those days. We just went over and have a look at Howard. Says, "What are you doing?" I said, "The guy wants to know when the World Series." He says, "Go tell him to fuck himself." The skill I learned from that, I went back and said, "I'm sorry, sir, that information's not available at this time." But life went on, and a few years ago, when Howard got promoted to managing editor, we all missed him in the sports department, of course, but it was especially fun to see people from the news side come over, lean over the wall there and say, "I can't believe he said this. You won't believe what he told us." And we sit there and go, "Yeah, we believe you." But all good things must come to an end. And I think everyone who worked with Howard will agree that he made us better reporters, better editors, and better journalists. Skills I hope will come in handy next month when we're all looking for work. But thank you, Howard, and good luck on your retirement, and I hope you get to many World Series in the future.
Because of this guy. And I learned when I went to Ithaca, I was sports editor. I basically organized things same way I saw them at the Buffalo News, budgets, calendars, whatever. And as a reporter, there would always be one question that had to be asked about a story or coverage or whatever, and the question would definitely come from Howard Smith. He would hit the right point, like, what are we doing here? And definitely taught me a lot. And definitely gave me a lot of material. You just heard my best line. So I'll hit it again. Okay. That's when you knew the meetings were starting. Also, I swear, Bob, you really knocked him dead. I'm flabbergasted. I sit across the guy every night. Who knew? It's a little known fact, you might not know that Howard had a secretary for many years. A phone call would come in, and he would answer the phone. Buffalo News. Who was calling, please? Hey, it's Howard. Which I've been on both ends of. And I would have to go, there was a time I'd have to go in every week to talk to Howard about high school coverage, about what we're doing with our high school pages, planning things out and whatnot. And one time, a photo assignment happened to get screwed up in some manner or form. And this became an issue. And I was like, I don't know, it was on the assignment. Have I told you about photographers? I hate photographers. Can they do anything right? The answer is no. The answer is no. I'm sorry, Howard. I thought he would do the right thing. Do the right thing? Do the right thing? Given the choice between the right thing and the wrong thing, he'll do 180 degrees the wrong thing. And I have lots of, well, those are the best ones, so congratulations, Howard. Sorry.
Thank you, Keith. Keith is coming off of a bad cold. He's still not feeling well, so thank you for sucking it up and getting doing that. Next up is our Bills beat reporter, Mark Gaughan. Long list of people.
Okay, one of the most famous, one of the greatest editors ever at the Buffalo News was a hard-boiled city editor named Bud Wacker. And one of the most famous Bud Wacker stories is a young cub reporter calls in from a fire. It's the winter time. He's got a cold. He got wet covering the fire. He's dictating to the dictation clerk. He decides, you know, I gotta go find somewhere warm before I finish my story. The dictation clerk hollers over to Bud, says, look, he's gonna finish his story in a little while. Bud comes over, rips the phone out of the dictation clerk's hand, and says, don't you dare die before you finish dictating this story. This story reminds me of one of the famous bus blow a gasket stories in Howard's career. Now, I think, first of all, it's great that we have such a good turnout here, because 40 plus years in the business is a remarkable accomplishment. I mean, this business is difficult, as many of us, as we all know, takes a physical and emotional toll. Working on deadline, day after day, running through the news cycle is very difficult. It takes a special person to last 40 plus years in this business. It's a grind. And covering the Super Bowl years was a particular grind for all of us, because 4 straight years in the Super Bowl, the Bills had a nationally prominent team. There were national stories breaking, you know, almost weekly around the Bills. And so so we get to the Super Bowl, and the Super Bowl, I'm thinking, you know, this is the third one. Bills play Dallas in Los Angeles. Now, by the time we get to the Super Bowl, we've run 3 24-page special sections in 4 weeks. We get to the Super Bowl. Sounds like a great assignment. It's a lot of fun, but it's a 70-hour work week, and there's no way to get around it. It is, and by the time you get to the game, you're totally on fumes. So it was, and we do this 3 years in a row, actually 4 years in a row. So this is the 3rd year, and we're worn out. So you're so happy the game is finally over. So the NFL, after the game ends, they run this buffet dinner, or a buffet brunch for all the reporters at a hotel. So we make our way back from the game to this brunch, in a big hotel conference room. The Buffalo News people are sitting at this round table, and you know, we are just dead. I mean, we're totally spent, worse than the Bills, who just lost 52-17. And Vic Carucci gets a call. There's a radio rumor Marv Levy just had a heart attack and died. And this was the point. After all this, Howard, it was his breaking point. And I will try to recall his reaction. How dare he? How dare he die? How dare he die on me at 2 in the morning? It took about 10 minutes to scrape him. And fortunately for all of us, and Marv, it was a erroneous report, which he's unfortunately wasted most of our time chasing. And we survived that. But, you know, that kind of speaks a little bit to how much Howard cares. And Howard held the bar high for all of us throughout his whole career. He sweat the small stuff. Every story he treated like it was important. And so when you were on the phone with Howard every day, it was, okay, who did you talk to? What did they have to say? Well, why did they say that? What didn't they say? What didn't you ask them? Who didn't you talk to? How can we get them to say what we want them to say? How come you didn't talk to that person? How's the story shaping up? What did you got? What are you gonna include? What aren't you gonna include? Well, don't include this. Make sure you don't include this. We don't want to hear this. Don't include this again. Okay, Howard, I'm not gonna include that. But that is how sweating the details and sweating the small stuff is the only way to get it right. And Howard did that. He held the bar high for all of us. So thank you, Howard, for holding the bar high. Thank you for holding us to your high standards. And thank you for making us all better.
Good job, Mark. I remember getting a call during the Super Bowl years as well, telling a bunch of editors, "You're killing me!" Certainly did. We're getting close to the end here, I promise. Next up is our former NHL writer, Jim Kelly. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Unlike everyone who spoke before me, I have no notes because in the true tradition of my time at the news, as Howard would say, you're totally unprepared. So I thought on this, his last hour, I would honor him with that. But I knew everybody who spoke before me would be a tough act to follow. Steal a line from Bob Kaczynski. Charlie, if that's your definition of short, your wife is probably the happiest woman on the planet. It's an old joke, but it's as I look over this room, so is the group who's still here. And for the most part, though, I think a lot of people painted a picture of Howard that is totally unfair. I mean, Bob Summers said that he was tough on him in terms of acknowledging that Bob may have made a mistake. That was never the case with me, because I, for the longest time, worked the night shift, and Howard was able to correct my errors by bringing me back at 6 a.m. to do Sports Today. He told me that would be a feather in my cap. I told him I didn't wear one, and we kind of were at odds for quite a long time after that. Another thing Howard has often been accused of is being a stickler for detail and maybe a little on the dull side. He'd come to work, he'd go home, he'd play tennis. Late in life, or in his life anyways, he took up golf and found something else to curse at. But what a lot of people, including, I see his children are here, Matt and Cindy, and they probably don't know this and might be a little embarrassed, but your dad ran an escort service for the longest time. For instance, Howard was the first guy to escort Maury May out the door. And on more than 5 occasions, he would escort me to the publisher's office for maybe to work out a couple of things that maybe the publisher didn't agree with, maybe the commissioner of the National Hockey League wasn't happy with, maybe Jeremy Jacobs wasn't really particularly pleased with, and on the odd occasion, some clown by the name of Rich would call. I never could get his first name, Bob, but and to give Howard the benefit that a lot of people never quite understood, he took all that for us. Everybody here said he made them a better writer, a better editor, and that's true. I was one of the few people there who predated Howard's arrival. And so the first thing we did when we heard about the new guy was call down to the Washington Star, said, "What's the story on this guy?" And the guy responded by saying, "Well, he doesn't like hockey." And I thought, oh, great. And the second thing he said was, and he put us out of business. So we were really optimistic when Howard came along. But in that time, he did make us all better writers. He made us all, in my mind at least, really good reporters. As Mark said, you had to get it right. He also taught us how to sigh. I don't know if a lot of you people got that routine, but when you got it maybe not exactly wrong, but you really didn't have it the way he liked it, you'd get the I have passed that on to my children. They know when I'm not happy that they get the... But at the end of my career at the news, a brief 32 years, that I have to tell the story because I was stopped. Because of Howard Smith, I won several, well, I won one award, okay. But it was a good one. And Howard was kind enough to go to bat for me with Murray Light, who wanted me to walk to Albany to pick up the award. And Howard had a way of getting around things like that, and he told me I could drive as long as I didn't put in for the mileage. So I flew, and I didn't tell anybody. He also gave me a geography lesson. Again, these are all positive things. For instance, a lot of people know that in the hockey beat you travel quite a bit. And Mark mentioned 3 trips to the Super Bowl. We had that, or 4 trips. We had that all in one year when the Sabres went to the 1999 Stanley Cup Finals. So, in fact, I believe that was the game you actually went to, right? It's the last game then. But, you know, because of that, I got to see a lot of the country. My friends who were doing that series would get up in the morning in Buffalo, go to the airport, get on an American Airlines flight, you know, maybe 11 o'clock in the morning after they had a good night's sleep after the game, fly directly to Dallas. We got a little chance to do more. We got to get up at 5. Be at the airport at 6 because we could save $7.57. And then we also got to see Chicago and Kansas City en route to Dallas, which broadened our perspective on that series. A lot of guys were just seeing 2 cities, we were seeing America. And so Howard, I want to thank you for that. I'm sure Stan was much appreciated, even though I did break the budget on that Vancouver to New York Stanley Cup final, which I think still stands as the most expensive account in the history of the sports department. The other geographical thing he taught me I didn't know in that series, and after that series, we had to go to the draft. And he asked me where the draft was, and I told him, and his response was, Van-fucking-Coover? So as you can see, there were cities in the league that we did not know about. But we got to visit him because he's a good man and a good editor and wanted to broaden our horizons. And so for that, I thank Howard. Because of him, I went from high school, so Keith, hold out hope, to a major beat on this newspaper. I had the extreme good fortune to be recognized by a couple of halls of fame, one in Buffalo and one in the National Hockey League. And all that came about because I took Howard to lunch and I bought as a high school writer, and I told him I didn't want to be this for the rest of my life. And he took it seriously, and he helped me to get that beat, and he helped me to get good at that beat, and he helped me to position myself to leave the Buffalo News before they laid me off. And I thank him for that. And he also gave me the greatest advice I ever got in leaving the company and going to a new one. And he said, walk in like you own the goddamn place, because they won't know any better. And I did that for Fox. It lasted 3 years, but they were a good 3 years. Not quite as good as my time at the news. And so, Howard, I thank you for everything you did for me. All those positive things have had an impact on my life and my career. And I know a lot of people thought this day would never come, and the other 100 here couldn't wait. So in that regard, I close, and thank you very much.
All we do is have meetings to find out when the next meeting is going to be. But I was smart enough to bring some of the things that Howard gave to me a couple of years ago. This is his original ruler. You guys in the sports department will recognize it. And you've all done it. I can't come back and say it was photographers, it was these guys, it was those guys. He did it all. He had the ruler, he had the clipboard, and I still walk around all day long with the clipboard because he taught me that if you have a clipboard and a cell phone, people think you know what you're doing. You walk around all day long. But I really didn't write out a speech because I knew you guys would beat me to it with all these great lines. Although I do feel bad for Charlie Garfinkel. I told him to keep it clean. And he was going to tell a Dolly Parton joke. I mean, big deal. I mean, compared to some of the stuff I heard tonight. Charlie, you want to get up here and do that, Charlie? I'm going to keep it short and sweet because, you know, Howard is the man of the hour, but everyone seems to think it's 1980, and maybe it is, but if that's the case, Howard, Maria Shanahan told me it was August 31st, 1981. So I think the company's trying to screw you out a year or something. And I wouldn't be surprised about that. But if it was August 31st, 1981, the Buffalo News front page, bomb hits U.S. base in Germany. Upstage is the new guy coming into the sports department. This is the front page. Talk about reinventing the news. Chase Manhattan lowers prime rate on loans to 20%. Million Tehran mourners blame U.S. in bomb death of president and premier. New spending cut plans could sever old ties. This stuff is the same shit. And we have a little 8-head in the middle of the page 1, filling this page. Is an inch hole. So what do we put in there? 1 paragraph. What does it say? Girl dismembered? Girl electrocuted. Girl electrocuted, 1 paragraph short, on page 1 of the Buffalo News. So, 30 years later, we're still in reinventing the news. But I'm gonna cut it short because I was here in 1978 before Howard got here. He came here. We were a good sports department. We had a lot of good people. But he came here and turned us into a big league town. Not that we weren't big league, but we were Buffalonians and looking from the inside. He turned us into we thought beyond our borders then. We went out there and we started changing the way we covered our pro teams. I even found this old blue streak, Howard. I mean, I don't know if some of you guys remember this, but Jim Kelly's on the cover. How we covered pro football in those days was basically advance the game, go out and cover the game. We turned it into a production, and we sold some papers doing that. He did a lot of those kind of things. He brought some spark to the department, some innovation, and we all went along for the ride. But the best thing for me is that he trusted us. You know, he yelled at us in his office, and it took a lot of hard work to turn us into real pros, but he did it. And we all laugh about it. He went upstairs, he had to fight with the big shots on the 5th floor, the 4th floor, the 3rd floor, outside the department. But the thing I'll always remember is that he always had our back. Always. He never let us down. I'll give you Howard Smith. Oh, sign the card too. The Shamrock card, sign that baby before you go home. Oh, I'm sorry. I should remember this. He's not here tonight, and we've lost a lot of good people, but Tom Borelli, God rest his soul, he hung this up in Howard's office on a Thanksgiving weekend, and this and like 30 more all around the office, and Howard came in and said, "What the hell is this?" Tom, I don't know anything about it. He denied it to the end. Karen left us for me last week. She said, "Make sure Howard gets this."
Thanks for all the kind words. I knew we should have stopped with Margaret. I'm really glad kind of that we can come here tonight and sort of everybody has a drink and everybody has a chicken wing and everybody has a smile and everybody gets to insult me. Because it's been a really tough time for the Buffalo News for the last 6 months or so. The people that we've lost, 3 people in their prime who were important parts of the team. Not as important, but just as scary to a lot of us. The problems that newspapers are having, the problems that the news is having, and hopefully we're at least on a solid platform for the time being after that, due to a lot of work by a lot of people. And so I'm really happy that we can kind of come and even if we have to insult me for an hour and a half, it's worth it to get some smiles. I want to start by just saying a word to the Police Athletic League gang that is back there. Kate and Tony Masiello and Sue Gonzalez and Tom and everybody. I had the pleasure to be on the board of directors of PAL for a while, and if any of you are looking for a place to send your donations or looking to get involved in something, this is an organization where it absolutely goes straight to the kids of Buffalo who get a lot out of it, and it was pretty much dead. I'll just be brief, but it pretty much dead until Tony and Kate Masiello brought it back and revived it, and Byron Brown and his administration have followed up with it, and they're pretty interested in it. And so I just say thank you guys for coming, and especially thank you for the great work you do in PAL. So thanks so much. I started out in this business 112 years ago, really for a simple reason. I just thought it was important that people know what's really going on, what is going on here, and I felt I needed to try to help tell them. And 40 years later, I haven't learned much, because I still think that's the most important thing that we do, is try to find out what's really going on here and tell people. And I know it becomes even more difficult in these troubled times where we have difficulties to the left, difficulties to the right, difficulties above us, and it becomes even more important to do the job right. Nobody said it was going to be easy, but a lot of people have said it's important, and it really is. And one of the things that I feel best about is that I've been able to spend time with a group of people who are so good at what they do and so intent on doing it right. The sports department is where I spent most of my time, and it was a terrific experience. I think that working with a lot of people, pretty much everybody in sports was dedicated to doing it right. Everybody had their own opinion on the best way to do it right, of course, but everybody wanted to get there at the end, to get to the same place. And it was just terrific working there. I think that one of the things I'm going to miss is the idea that that phone is going to ring and God knows what the information is going to be on the other end of it. There have been a lot of my favorite phone call during the time I've been there was from Bill Polian when I was in sports back during the Super Bowl years. And Polian, as many of you know, was a red-haired, red-faced, crazy person who went off at the slightest provocation. And one day, Jerry Sullivan wrote a column, and who would have dreamed that that would upset anybody? But Jerry wrote a notes column, and at the very bottom of the notes column, he made a reference to Mark Kelso. Mark Kelso was a defensive back for the Bills, some of you may remember, and he was a little guy, and he had a couple of concussions. So they got this gigantic helmet that they built up for him, and it had all kinds of stuffing in it, and he looked like one of those Looney Tune characters with a big head. And so Jerry made a remark in his column at the bottom, a throwaway line, something to the effect of, it doesn't matter if Mark Kelso has a giant helmet or no helmet at all, because he never gets close enough to anybody to actually tackle him. And that was it. It wasn't that bad for Jerry. It was a pretty mild line. Polian called up and was out of his mind and cursing at Murray up and down, cursing at me, and cursing at Jerry and cursing at everyone. And at the end of this, he actually concluded by saying that I ought to get up off my chair, go home and take a bath to wash off the filth I get from associating with the sports writers in our department. So, I mean, this is a guy who, it was an interesting phone call. Another phone call I won't forget, many of you may know about, 11:30 at night, the phone rings, and reach for it like this. It's Jim Kelly calling from the locker room, calling from the hallway outside the locker room. Dominic Hasek just attacked me. He knocked me into the wall. He went crazy. And I say to myself, my first thought was, why would Dominic Hasek attack Jim Kelly? My second thought was, I can think of 100 reasons Hasek would attack Jim Kelly. Anyway, so Jim says, we gotta, protest this. We have to go to the league. We have to go to the Writers Association. And by the way, my shirt got ripped. Will the News pay for a new shirt? So of course we did. We paid for a new shirt. He had to get it at Kmart. But and there were those who say it actually improved his wardrobe. I never said that though. One more phone call I'll mention. 10:30 at night, the phone rings, and it's Esmond. Esmond, as many of you may not know, used to work in sports. Used to work for a living in the sports department. And Don is calling live from Philadelphia at the Final Four. I think it was Philadelphia. And he says, my column might be a little late. I say, okay, why is your column going to be? He says, I lost my notebook. Surprisingly, not surprisingly, he lost his notebook. Surprisingly, he says, I've tracked it down to a dumpster that's outside the Spectrum. And I think it's in there somewhere, but I got to go in and get it. And I might have to root around for a while to find it. So can we plug for the first edition? So, okay, fine, we plug for the first edition. And the bottom line is Don actually found his notebook in there. And I think one of the things that story illustrates for me is that whether it's dumpster diving or no matter what it is, the guys in the sports department were always willing to do whatever it took to get the story.
Our expense accounts were so small back then, I was just going for a meal.
Well, and speaking of that expense account, I know you get dirty going in a dumpster, but 3 suits, 2 pairs of pants, 2 sport coats. Laurie Felser isn't the only one who needs 4 sets of clothes to cover a football game. Anyway, recently I've come on the other side of the wall and been in the managing editor's office. And Margaret, I have to tell you, those 15 years in the ME's office just flew right by. I mean, just sailed by. No, I really do appreciate you giving me that chance to do that. And it's been 2 years. And for me, it was a great learning experience. I got to work with a lot of people who I didn't have an opportunity to work with so much before. But I really appreciate your putting up with me in the ME part of it and for accepting me in that role and for working with me. And it's been terrific. I want to say, finally, thanks to Dennis and to Steve and John Neville for putting on the party. I want to say special thanks to Cindy, the daughter, for all she did for the party. Also, thanks for hitting that ball off the Winter-Free Pizza sign in left field in Orchard Park Little League 12 years ago. That was actually the highlight of our season, I think. So thank you. I want to say thanks to Matthew, the son, for driving up here from DC and leaving all them billable hours on his desk. Also, Matt, thanks for spending the last 20 years giving me suggestions as to what the sports department ought to be writing about. I appreciate the input. Special thanks to Virginia, the wife, without whom no bills would ever get paid, no tax forms would ever be filled out, no checkbook would ever balance, no check would ever not bounce, no fruit would ever enter the home, no yard work would get done, and the dog would have died years ago from malnutrition. Also, thanks for putting up with late night phone calls and missed dinners and aberrant behavior during Notre Dame football games and all the rest of it, so thank you. Finally, if anybody knows how to cure a slice, or if anybody knows how to develop a good kick serve, or if anybody just wants to help polish off a bottle of scotch, I'll be around. Thank you so much for coming.
As a parting gift, we all got together, everyone here, and we were trying to figure out what we should get you. We thought golf, we thought tennis. Your other true loves besides your wonderful family is Notre Dame football and the Cleveland Indians. And we did the Notre Dame football with the card so we thought we would do Cleveland Indians baseball. And you are going to be taking your lovely bride to a Cleveland Indians New York Yankees game on May 30th. And you're going to be staying at the Radisson Inn Hotel, which is right across from Progressive Field. And so we hope you enjoy that day, that weekend.
Wow.
Okay?
That's great.